Welcome, Dinsdale.
Yes. How are you?
Sometimes my spirits sink below the high water mark in Palestine, adjusting gradually. For what I am about to receive, may I make myself truly thankful. Soon I must be moving on. Sail away, Lallaha, New Jersey, port side and crew. First, I shall command the Pope to consecrate a plain load of contraceptives for the priest-ridden Irish. Pax et benedictus and auctorius nostrum in Dominus vobiscum. Arise, shine, for my light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee.
Here is the brag, see how it goes. Down on your heels, up on your toes. That's the way to do the varsity drag.
Mrs. Pickett Jones and Mrs. Treadwell.
You can pass many a class, whether you're dumb or wise. If you all answer the call when your professor cries. Everybody down on the heels, up on the toes. Stay after school, learn how it goes. Everybody do the varsity. Everybody do the varsity. Everybody do the varsity drag.
It was good to start off the program here on Public Radio KCBX with a song, especially if it is Peter O'Toole in the ruling class. Good evening, one and all. It's Public Radio KCBX and Take Two, the movie program. And across the aisle from me, as always, it's, let's just get down to brass tacks. It's the ultimate film guy. It's my good friend, Bob Whiteford.
Thanks, Jimmy. And across the aisle from me, the undisputed czar of film on the Central Coast, King Vidor Award-winning, celluloid visionary, a man you and I both are proud to call a friend. Of course, I'm talking about none other than gentleman Jim Dee. And Jimmy, we've got an interesting show on tap this week.
Very interesting. You know, the subject of tonight's program came out of a conversation that Bob and I had while talking about a specific film we're going to be talking about maybe midway through the program. And, you know, quite a few years ago, I'm not sure when it was, Bob, but we did do a show called Movies That Break the Rules. We're kind of in that similar territory here, although, the title of tonight's show were Films We Can't Believe Got Made. Excuse me. And, you know, this is a pretty broad category. We've got to narrow it down. I mean, take any of the pre-code films that we've talked about on this show from the early 30s to about 35. Babyface comes to mind. We can think, wow, can't believe this movie got made. There may be a film that you really disliked. You could be in the movie theater and say, boy, that was really a piece of junk. I can't believe this movie got made. However, the criteria for our show tonight, Bob and I took into account and hand-selected some real gems for you. And these are ones where big stars are involved in these rather outrageous films. Big directors were involved in some of the films we'll be talking about tonight. And yet these films can get into the category of how on earth they got made. And Bob, what we need to do is think about the Robert Altman film, The Player. And as the film opens up, it's Buck Henry going to Griffin Mill, played by the great Tim Robbins, and, trying to peddle the film The Graduate 2. Now, each and every one of these films tonight, we have to think about that scenario when the director or the writer or whoever it was went into a producer and said, hey, let's make this movie. And boy, I guess we're glad that these were green lighted because, boy, there were some interesting green lights on tonight's show.
Absolutely, Jimmy. And I think it's worth noting as well. It's like, you could apply this to any movie Ed Wood made. Of course, his travails in making films made the process probably all the more difficult. Crazy films like Cannibal Holocaust or Necromantic, you're like, whoa, how did that get made? And I get that. We get that. We're going to talk about, some films like Jim said that have big stars, big directors from big studios, and you're wondering, which cigar-chomping executive said, go ahead and do this. Because, I mean, we're glad that they did. Because, frankly, we like all of these movies we're about to discuss. But, you know, liking them, you still kind of sitting there going, huh? How did this ever happen?
And I think we also need to factor into the mix here, Bob, in the fact that here we are, 2009, and there's great movies being made out there. You really have to search for them, but really, the ones that really want to tweak the audience, and I would say nowadays, moviegoers are somewhat astonished and overwhelmed with great computer graphics. In other words, my gosh, they can recreate anything on the screen. Or we go to the torture films like the Saw series and things like that, where it's like, how much gore and torture, or how much can we really, put the audience through? Now, the films we're discussing tonight, I think, go much further and much deeper. We have a lot of religious undertones here, where religion is sort of hung out to dry in some of these films. And really taking on some issues of, much more strongly and much more creatively. And then, of course, we have some sexual films that seem to be, absolutely outrageous, and you've got great stars starring in these things, but there's sort of a playfulness. I mean, they're willing to get outrageous with sexuality, and yet doesn't seem dirty, or it doesn't seem like it's salacious. It's more fun, and again, watching some of this stuff, Bob, can't believe it got made.
Yeah, it's almost like it takes sexuality and turns it on its ear and makes it absurd. We could say that about Showgirls, except I think they tried to play it straight and it ended up a disaster. Kind of like Valley of the Dolls, another one that clearly, when they started filming it, it's like, we're going to make this adaptation of the Jacqueline Suzanne book. Did they know they were making a camp classic? Maybe, maybe not. But with these films, I'm sure when they were being made, people were going, whoa, this is off the grid, and I kind of dig this, and let's see where it ends up.
Well, we opened up the program tonight with, one of my favorite films for its audaciousness. We heard Peter O'Toole in The Ruling Class, and I can understand how this film may not be to all taste, but this film is such biting satire. It is such a scathing indictment of religion, different types of religion. The fact that Peter O'Toole thinks that he's Jesus Christ. The first half of the movie, actually, he thinks he's somebody else the latter part of the movie, which I don't want to give away to the listeners who may not have seen this outrageous film. But also in this film, Bob, if you watched it recently, it gets pretty heavy and intense, and when it does, they break into a song like we opened up with the program, and it is just off the charts as far as satire, parody, scathing in both regards. And then, I don't want to give too much away. Here's Peter O'Toole with this royal family, and they think he's a crackpot because he thinks he's the Prince of Peace, Jesus Christ, and he sleeps on a cross in the living room. But I don't think any viewer not seeing this film would know the twists and turns that this makes about midway to three-quarters of the way through the film. It goes way off the charts. As far as being a satire or a commentary on religion, it goes way, way beyond.
Well, Jimmy, this film, it's so biting. It literally cuts through the flesh, the blood, the muscle, straight to the marrow in its satire. And it seems to me it's the focal point of this hilarious, ferocious, just unabashed assault is on the British upper ruling class. And in that country, church and state amongst the ruling class, quote unquote, are one. And so you can't help but assail religion as well as the House of Lords, which has always been, I would say, in Britain's democracy, kind of this place where all these well-to-do landed nut jobs, and they're only there because of their wealth and their pedigree, and most of them are probably certifiably insane or senile or worse, and this film attacks it. And what's brilliant about this, Jim, Peter O'Toole, he plays a lord, and he's out of his tree, thinks he's Jesus, and he's clearly nuts. He's almost unabashed in his mania, and we can't help but like him. But what we see is he's surrounded by all these other people who are allegedly normal, functioning members of society, and we see how they think and act, and we can see very clearly that they're really off the beam because they're nuts and they don't know it. Peter Medak directed this, a wonderful film. Anybody who likes great class-conscious comedies, and the British do them very well, as evidenced by films Jim and I were talking about not too long ago with our new buddy Malcolm McDowell. I'm thinking about If and Oh Lucky Man. They do this so well, and this, probably The Ruling Class, is right at the top of British class comedies, and it's comedy with such an absurd, satiric, rapier-witted, will just cut you to pieces edge that, boy, I can't say enough good things about this film.
And while it's doing that, of course, again, they'll break into a song, and there's some dialogue in this film, lots of dialogue that's really incredible. Now, embracing our theme, can't believe this got made, there's Peter O'Toole, world-renowned star who's willing to embrace this incredibly eccentric, but I can't think of anybody else who would play this role the way he embraces it. Also surrounding Peter O'Toole, all these great British actors that you've probably seen in many other films. In fact, there's a bishop played by Alastair Sim who played Scrooge in the film Scrooge, and he is absolutely great.
There's Charles Gray and his wife Coral Brown, Charles Gray was in many films. He was in a couple of Bond films as the Heavy. The pair of them, that played Shakespeare with Lord Larry and all the rest of the giants of British cinema. It's a British film, so there's no bad actors in it. They just can't produce bad actors.
And I just think the way they embrace this material, it's very, I wonder when they're making, I could apply this to all the films on tonight's program, while they're making it, or they're saying, boy, are we really making the greatest satire? Is this going to fall on its face, or are we going to be, hung out to dry by the critics? Who knows? But in this case, I think The Ruling Class is right up there. I think they knew what they were doing, and it's brilliant and wow, edgy.
And stands up well 37 years after it was made. It's just, that's the mark of a great film. You wonder how it was received when it came out, probably with a lot of jaw-dropping, I think is a term we're going to use consistently tonight.
That's it. The jaw-dropping, we can't believe this movie got made show on Take Two. And our first film, The Ruling Class, we can't believe it got made, but we're so glad that it did. Moving on now to a film that you may have seen way back in the 60s or 70s. I believe it was, I'm not sure the date on this film.
69-70.
69-70. We're talking about star power that's unbelievable. We'll start with Ringo. Ringo stars in this movie, and Richard Burton, the great actor, singer from France, Charles Aznavour, John Huston and John Astin, and we'll just play the scene. Here is Ewa Allen and Marlon Brando.
What is your name?
Candy.
Candy. How do you spell it?
Candy.
Are you telling me the truth? Be careful.
Well, of course I am. My name is...
Wait. Do not say it again. It is a holy name. It is one of the unspoken.
I don't understand.
Listen. Candy. 5 letters. 5, the magic number. 5, the holy pentagram. The first letter of your name is C. C, the sign of the eagle talon, the immutable symbol of masculine force. The last letter of your name. Y, the sign of the yoni, the all-pervading female. And the middle letters, A and D, C and Y. Now do you understand?
I'm not sure.
Wait, do not speak, do not move. There is further proof.
Oh my gosh. I thought...
Yes, you thought perhaps I was suspended in the air.
Well, it looked like it.
It's Marlon Brando having trouble getting out of the lotus position in Candy. What can we say about Candy, Bob?
The jaw dropping. When I saw this film a few years back, I remember seeing it with my ex-wife, and who's a huge movie fan, and she just, when it was over, she just went, ugh, what the hell was that? She literally said, how did that ever get made? And, I didn't have an answer for her because my jaw had hit the ground. This movie was so weird. You got Ringo as a Mexican gardener. You've got Walter Matthau is in this. This is one of the most peculiar, eccentric, perversely weird films I've ever seen in my life. And it sports an unbelievable cast, as you mentioned. It's funny. It's a train wreck. It's funny. It's directed by the French actor Christian Marquand, who, pardon my French, it's pretty bad, but he was in the French plantation sequence in Apocalypse Now. That's one where I know he's readily thought about. Of course, he's done a ton of other movies. This film, the screenplay was by Terry Southern, and I think what they were going for was another Magic Christian.
Which would also fit on this show.
Absolutely, except Magic Christian, for all its bizarreness, almost seems coherent by comparison. This film is so over-the-top weird. I think it's Terry Southern and Buck Henry who actually wrote this. It's, Richard Burton, every time he shows up in the film, his hair's blowing back, and he's wearing this neckerchief that's blowing back. The wind's blowing because he's always pontificating poetry and existential thought. I mean, he was an intellectual. This is so bizarre. And, Jim, I just get a sense that Brando, Burton, Ringo, holy cow, Charles Aznavour, even Matthau, I don't think one of them was sober through the entire thing.
Well, I wonder how much work they put into it. If it was a day's work, hey, we can get Brando, let's get him looking like the Maharishi or something, or you wonder how much improvisation was going on here. But, again, to assemble this cast, and from the other side of the coin, the fact that these guys would jump at the chance, you'd think, to be in this movie. And of course, let's just say the plot. Everyone wants to sleep with Candy. That's pretty much it. But as you said, a train wreck with one of the most star-studded casts in movies. It's
Well, it comes down to this, Jimmy. You got Brando as a Maharishi, a guru, driving around in an 18-wheeler, and it's his, it's his love den in the back where he does yoga. It's all pillows and yoga and hookah pipes and sitar music, and he just drives all over the country. It is so damn weird, and yeah, I mean, I could see some people going through the roof when they saw this, and probably a lot of empty theaters when it played. But I gotta say, I got a kick out of it. It's just so weird, and all these big stars that just, I mean, they're so heavily made up and everything, so at least they're hanging around for that part of it. It's so strange. And I would say to folks out there, if you want one example of 60s excessive, over-the-top filmmaking, you might want, if that's your forte, Candy might be the film for you.
You know, Bob, I got to think that, the answer to our question, if you're looking at Robert Altman's The Player and you're going to pitch your film to Griffin Mill, hey, we got this, sexy film, and we've got Brando, and we've got Walter Matthau, and we've got Richard Burton. Greenlight it in a second.
Absolutely. And I guess this thing bombed. It made Hiroshima seem small by comparison. But it's achieved a cult status down the years because I think a lot of people over time just got a kick out of seeing all these big stars. And let's face it, Richard Burton and Marlon Brando and Walter Matthau, they're like three of the best actors of their generation in their various ways. I would say Burton and Brando are two of the best that ever existed. And seeing them in this, well, it just, after the shock wears off, all you can do is laugh.
Bob and I recommend Candy. It's another film we can't believe got made, but we're glad it did. Hey, here's a companion piece for Candy. As we started the show, Bob was talking about Valley of the Dolls, and now we're going to talk about Russ Meyer's classic, a good companion piece with Candy, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls.
What I want to know, Jim, in 1970, how the heck did Russ Meyer get a contract, a movie deal with 20th Century Fox? I mean, granted, Faster Pussycat Kill Kill, Vixen, Motor Psycho. I mean, I love these movies. They're wonderful pictures. I still can't believe that 20th Century Fox someone there said, you know what? Sign him. Let's see what he can do with a huge budget. And well, we got our answer with Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, and it's worth mentioning, and I know we've talked about this quite a few times, Roger Ebert's screenplay. I guess Roger Ebert and Russ Meyer were friends for a long time, and this is an interesting collaboration, to say the least. And, the ladies in CinemaScope on the big screen in spectacular color. It's wow.
In various dress and undress.
Undress, yes. This is a most peculiar and wonderfully, it's savagely funny. If you try to take it straight, you're missing the boat.
Yes.
You have to take this with not a grain of salt, but maybe like a whole sack of salt, because it is a black comedy with a capital B, and it is hilarious. And I think, unlike Valley of the Dolls, which, oddly enough, the films are not connected, except that they were produced by the same studio. Visually, they look similar because they're both 20th Century Fox, and they both have that big, the gals have the big hair and all this, and the crazy, unrealistic color, Technicolor, which makes it even nuttier still. But this film is a blast, an absolute riot.
Here's a scene from Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, directed by Russ Meyer. Listen to the scintillating script. This conversation written by Roger Ebert.
How did your mother learn about Aunt Claire?
The Worcester paper. That's where she heard about Aunt Claire's death and about you and Baxter Wolf and the inheritance.
What inheritance was that?
Mine, of course. I was the last in line after my older sister. Your mother disappeared. Unfortunately, we were never really close. I was 14 years younger than she was. But now that you've come along, Kelly, I think that part of it should be yours.
Susan. Susan, you know full well there was no provision in the will.
Thousand Island.
Oh, thank you.
You're a lawyer. You should know better than anyone that wills are just scraps of paper.
I'm a lawyer, yes. And I can advise you, Susan, that any changes Aunt Claire would or might have made have no validity in law.
Porter, of course I know all that. Kelly, there was nearly $1 million. Now, I know this isn't the time or the place to talk about it, but since Porter's made such a point of it, I can't see why, say, a third of it shouldn't be yours.
A third of $1 million?
Well, the two of us are the only survivors, Kelly, and, well, I don't see why you have to pay for the sins of your mother. Sins it seemed to me that were really committed by the rest of the family.
Wow. It's a big idea to get used to.
Well, don't strain yourself. I'll have Porter draw up the papers. I have a marvelous idea. Lonnie Barzell's throwing a party tonight.
Ronnie Barzell? You mean Z-Man Barzell?
The one, the only, the original.
Susan, I've got these friends in a rock group, and it would mean so much for them to meet Z-Man. Can I invite them?
Don't tell me you're a groupie.
The other way around. It's my group.
Now, let me be sure I fully understand this. You are a rock and roll singer?
Why? Is that a no-no?
My dear young lady.
Porter, you have an unending capacity for counterfeit astonishment. Of course you can invite your friends. There's a telephone in the living room, and I think that Ronnie's address is in my book under the beads.
Great. I'm not dressed for a party, though.
We're about the same size, and I got loads of things in my closet. Why don't you go call your friends, then slip into anything you like, okay?
Oh, groovy, thanks.
Isn't that great? I mean, there's not one breath between any of the lines.
No.
And the movie runs about 100 minutes plus. And guess what, folks? That's how the dialogue goes all the way through.
And the editing, Bob, when I was watching some of this today, it somehow it didn't remind me of a film that was made like in the 60s or 70s. I mean, it was just rapid fire editing, and I thought, wow, this has more of a sensibility rhythmically, shall we say, of a current film rather than something that was made way back when. And I almost feel, Russ Meyer loves his bevy of beautiful babes.
Buxom beauties.
Yeah, and in this film, it almost feels like, a beach party movie set in Hollywood. It has that sort of, everyone's twisting and rocking and reeling with a feeling, but it gets pretty audacious. Oh, that one woman dancing in the dance hall, she's naked,
Yep. It is. It's like a beach movie on acid. And
then some.
And then some. And... you have Edie Williams. In the scene we just heard, Dolly Reed, who was married to Dick Martin of Rowan and Martin. Sue Bernard. I mean, these are all Playboy bunnies, but way beyond that. I mean, I think Edie Williams ended up being Russ Meyer's second or third or fourth wife. And she always had a penchant for taking her clothes off at the Coliseum when the Rams would play. I saw her on an episode of Adam 12 the other day on the beach, ready to take her clothes off. I mean, quite a character. They just don't make them like that anymore.
Well, we're talking about Russ Meyer's and Roger Ebert's Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. Here's the player scene, Bob. Hey, let's make a movie called Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. The guy smoking the cigar says, well, how much money did Valley of the Dolls make? Oh, it made that much. I'll go ahead and make it and put Beyond in front of it.
We'll have an all-girl rock band. They'll all be beautiful. One of them will be a lesbian. And it says, whoa. I'm even wondering if the studio execs even knew what was going on.
Oh, I doubt it.
I think when they saw the finished product, their cigars hit the floor.
Bob and I are talking about films we can't believe got made, although we're going to add, we're so glad they did. You're listening to Take Two on Public Radio, KCBX and KCBX HD1, San Luis Obispo, KSBX, Santa Barbara, and we are streaming worldwide at kcbx.org. More of Take Two in a moment.
You're listening to Take Two on Public Radio, KCBX San Luis Obispo, KSBX Santa Barbara, streaming at kcbx.org. And you can write to us at movies@kcbx.org.
Support for KCBX comes from the Coupe Winery Tasting Room, open daily in Los Olivos, featuring wines of Coupe, Verdad, and Ethan, sourced primarily from organic and biodynamic grapes. More at coupe.com.
Support for KCBX comes from Mission Community Bank, offering flexible and easy-to-use health savings accounts that enable you to take charge of your medical expenses, your savings, and your future. More at missioncommunitybank.com.
We're back on Take Two, the movie program. We're very glad that you're there listening. I'm here with my good friend Bob Whiteford. My name is Jim Dee, and we're talking about a handful of films that we couldn't believe got made, but we're certainly glad they did, for whatever reason. One more companion piece for the last two films we were discussing on the program, first with Candy and then Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. Let's complete the trilogy, Bob. We've got to talk about Myra Breckenridge.
Holy cow. I mean, here's a movie before the credits even come on, where John Carradine is a doctor and with his scalpel turns Rex Reed, that's right, the critic, into Raquel Welch. This is before the credits roll. This gives you an idea of the level of outlandishness we can expect. And I gotta say, I am so happy that this film finally surfaced. It came out in 1970, like Beyond the Valley of the Dolls and maybe Candy. I mean, what a magic year for outrageous cinema. This film was an unmitigated disaster from, I think it had a screening at the Castro in San Francisco, which was extremely successful. But what happened was the filmmaker, I think his name was Michael Carn, an English fellow, a lot of the picture really hung on clips from old movies being interspersed throughout the film. That made it very effective. But apparently some of the old stars didn't dig having their likenesses, or their old films shown in this picture, which was, shall we just say, controversial, to say the least, in its sexual picadillos and other weirdness. I mean, it's about Hollywood, so it's weird.
Once again, about Hollywood.
And I think it's worth noting this was Farrah Fawcett's first film.
Oh, I didn't know that, Bob.
She had a small part as, oddly enough, Raquel Welch's love interest, if you will. It's pretty peculiar. But the thing I like about this film, Jim, amongst so many things, it's always good to see John Huston there, overacting, and he's probably just saying this piece of crap is outlandish, and
loving it.
Loving it and taking the ball and running with it. Every Marquis de Sade sinewy part of him going crazy with this one. Again, it's like if you dig Candy and you dig Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, do yourself a solid and go all the way with Myra Breckenridge, based on the Gore Vidal book, which many people said was unfilmable. After watching this film, you may still think it was unfilmable, but you can say you saw this picture. It's outlandish. I think it plays a lot better now, Jimmy, because I think people have got a more warped sense of humor now, and it's more appreciated, more than it was at the time, which is unfortunate. I don't think Michael Carn ever got another shot. This was it, and it was... Well, I think behind the scenes, it was an epic disaster as well.
Well, you know, again, how the cast embraced this material. We talk about John Huston. We've got a clip. And Raquel Welch, you know, she was starring, you know, she was a great pinup gal back in the 60s and 70s, but also in much more mainstream films like, Fantastic Voyage. I can't think of too many other titles off the top of my head. But here, I think she was really taking a chance. And what I like about most of all these films is it seems like the stars, the actors were willing to go get a little bit outrageous without fear, is my career going to go down the drain if I take on this role in this wild picture? And again, the presence of these great actors in these films, I think, what makes them extraordinary in a way.
Well, you know, Jimmy, I gotta say, I agree with you. I think Raquel Welch really did take a chance with this picture, and I think she was looking, at least initially, to do something different because, you know, like 1 Million BC.
Oh, yes.
And, you know, I mean, basically it was just, she was just a pretty face and she wasn't really getting any acting chops anywhere where she could really show what she could do. And I'm certain that it was probably frustrating her to no end, which led to, you know, star tantrums and alike, which, frankly, at that time she was quite legendary for. And I salute her courage for taking this on, because it's almost like she's like, they won't give me anything good, then I'm going to run crazy with something that's bad, and let's see what happens. And it didn't destroy her career. I don't think it helped it, but it didn't destroy it. She was able to kind of come back, and she made some pretty decent movies after this. I think of Hanny Calder, a revenge western, which is pretty bizarre in its own right, and Kansas City Bomber, the great roller derby film of all time, which is another one that actually I'm very glad got made. But this film, holy cow. But thank you, 20th Century Fox, for reissuing this film on DVD. It has the original release, the one that everyone went crazy over in the San Francisco premiere, and it also has the studio release. So you get the best, quote-unquote, of both worlds.
Here is a scene from Myra Breckenridge. It is John Huston in like a 50-gallon hat. He's Uncle Buck, and he's talking to Raquel Welch.
So, you want to be a star. It's a hard road, and I feel I should say no siree. But something about you tells me I should give you a chance. What do you say? Can you take the heartache and the torture and the heat of them 5-kilowatt lamps over to MGM? From where I sit, I'd say you can. I can see your name in lights now. Fact is, you remind me of a certain one of our former successful students, a Miss Gloria Swanson. You've heard the name, I'm sure.
You mean she was one of your students?
You bet your sweet ass. Fact is, my students is always saying, Uncle Buck would want for you. We'd still be warm in that seat back in Schwab's drugstore.
Really? I thought that was where Lana Turner was discovered.
Her too. Well, I'll be gall-darned. You really done your homework. Yes, little lady. Lana Turner put her sweet little fanny right where you're sitting now. Lana, I says, what say we put you in a sweater and make a movie? And we did. What's your name, honey?
Myra Breckenridge.
That's a mite long for... Breckenridge?
Yes, I'm the widow of your late nephew, Myron, and I've come to collect $500,000.
We won't explain the explosions. You just need to see the movie, but that's a scene from the outrageous Myra Breckenridge. Bob and I can't believe it got made, but we're so glad it did. Let's move ahead now. Here is the film that actually got us on to the subject of tonight's show. And again, we segue nicely, John Huston with that outrageous performance in Myra Breckinridge, to a very small film that he directed in the 80s, and which disappeared almost from the face of the earth until Criterion re-released it. And here is a film that truly we cannot believe got made, especially John Huston directing it. Brad Dourif in a role that, his most amazing role since Billy Bibbit in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Harry Dean Stanton is also in this film. It's based on a story by Flannery O'Connor. It is called Wise Blood.
Holy cow. When my friend Todd loaned me this on DVD, I watched this film, and when it was over, I said to myself, no one would try to make this film today. No one.
Nope.
Even for no money. This is an amazing film in the sense it's kind of this crazy artifact that it came out at a time when you could actually, you could make fun. It's a satire about Southern religion. And it almost seems like that is now so sacrosanct now that you can't go near it. You can't touch it unless... And yet, it's a satire, and it's biting, but there's something endearing about the hucksterism. Brad Dourif is wonderful in this as Hazel Motes, one of the great anti-heroes of cinema.
Truly.
And Harry Dean Stanton being Harry Dean Stanton, I mean, that's always worth a look. And I think Ned Beatty has a nice bit part as another religious huckster who's also, I mean, I don't know, this film, and it was shot on location in Macon, Georgia. I think at the time the city was somewhat depressed, and it has this kind of, the place looks kind of seedy and kind of in a time capsule, too. It almost seems like it's a place where time stood still. I don't mean seedy. Forget I said that, because that's not, I think, what John Huston was saying. It's a place where time stood still. And just the way these characters work their mojo, if you will, it's pretty amazing. I mean, it's funny, it's sad, it's sickening, it's infuriating, it's pathetic, it's wonderful, it's inspiring, all almost in the same breath. It's ugly and beautiful at the same time. This, I don't know. Help me out here, Jimmy, because this one, my jaw is still hitting the ground.
Well, let's take it to the player. I would think that John Huston could have gone to Griffin Mill in the player, pitched this movie, and he would have said, no, I'm not making the movie. I mean, this is one, I'm really curious if it was just the force of John Huston at the helm. I'm not sure. I mean, it looks like it's a very low budget film, but, I don't see this film with this subject matter getting green-lighted by some cigar-chomping executive. Maybe. Oh, John, you're involved with it. Okay, maybe. But otherwise, the subject matter, I would think, would just go right over. I mean, this movie would not be made today, or would it be remade, which we're going to talk about our next film.
Right.
We should listen to this clip. This is Brad Dourif. He's just come into this town. He's noticed a name scrawled on a wall next to a payphone. And, it's a madam. I guess he doesn't really know who it is. And he's going to go visit her. And Brad Dourif, he's been sort of relegated to character actors and bit parts, but he embraces this character of Hazel Motes to the point where, again, I can't think of anybody else playing this role, just like Peter O'Toole playing Lord Gurney in The Ruling Class. Here's Brad Dourif talking to a taxi driver in Wise Blood.
60 Buckley Road. You ain't no friend of hers, are you?
I never saw her before. She don't usually have no preacher for company.
I ain't a preacher. I only seen her name in a toilet.
Well, you look like a preacher. Your hat looks like a preacher's hat.
It ain't. It's just a hat.
Well, it ain't only the hat. It's a look on your face somewheres.
Look here, I know preacher.
Now, I understand it ain't anybody perfect on this green earth. Not preachers, not nobody. And you can tell folks better how terrible sin is if you know from your own experience.
Listen, get this. There ain't but one thing that I want you to understand, and that's that I don't believe in anything.
Nothing at all?
Nothing.
Well, that's the problem with you preachers. You've all got too damn good to believe in anything.
It's a scene from Wise Blood, Brad Dourif as Hazel Motes, and I don't think we're giving too much away. He doesn't believe in anything, but he is going to establish the Church of Christ without Christ. There you go.
And there you have it. And you can imagine, or maybe you won't imagine, you'll be amazed where it goes from there.
Yeah, I can just see John Huston maybe reading this story and just, he's such a, edgy character himself as what we know of him. And I guess I see him reading this story and sort of relishing in its, perversity and its just whatever message it's trying to get across. But it is an absolutely unique film, Wise Blood, directed by John Huston. Okay, let's move ahead. The next film we're going to talk about has the subject matter of a police officer who, let's just say he is not the model police officer. We've seen this in films before, but it took the film Bad Lieutenant with the great Harvey Keitel to make one of the most unique and unlike any other cop films. And again, where this film goes as far as a policeman played by Keitel to go after, some criminals who have raped a nun, and of course we get to see that on screen. I would tend to think, Bob, that this film has almost a Martin Scorsese feel about it, but goes much, much further. I mean, I admire Scorsese, but I would almost put this film in the category of a cop who is imploding, who is, Keitel pulls out all the stops. This guy does drugs. He goes with prostitutes, and he likes to deliver swift justice with that gun of his. So it's
when he's not committing crimes himself.
Yes. A definitely unique picture of a policeman, but the depth of this film goes to what is justice. I mean, do you want the vigilante type on the police force who is dealing with his own inner demons, or in the world of crime, as we have a nun in this film who forgives those who perpetrated this crime against her, and this does not register well with Harvey Keitel, who wants to just, clean the streets up. I mean, we're almost borderline Taxi Driver here, where we've got Travis Bickle who wants to rid the dirt and filth, and yet it's Harvey Keitel who is the bad lieutenant.
Jimmy, that's an interesting point. I like that. This is almost like Harvey Keitel's Bad Lieutenant, Taxi Driver. Even though he was in the original, the thing is, Travis Bickle had some measure of good in him. It was warped. But in this film, Keitel, he really has no good in him. It's gone, or it's been drowned in vodka and dope and years of filth on the streets. This is an uncompromising, brutal, searing film. I hate using adjectives like that, but I don't know how else to describe it. When it was released, it was NC-17, which, let's face it, was X. And it's for sex, violence and sex. There's a violent rape scene to kick off the movie. I remember seeing this film in San Francisco. It came out in, I think, 92 or 93. And that's an audience base that, supposedly not easily shocked. And this film hit town with a lot of buzz. In fact, it came right on the heels of Reservoir Dogs, which also delivered some pretty heavy goods as well. Can almost include that here too. But in the span of like the first 10 minutes of The Bad Lieutenant, I sat in the theater with two buddies and we watched probably 30 out of 45 people leave.
Oh, easily. I could see how people would leave from this film.
And once it was all done, I loved the film. And it's based on a screenplay by the great character actor, now deceased, Vic Argo, who was also in Taxi Driver. It's interesting that you bring that up because I think this is an Abel Ferrara film, and Abel Ferrara did some good stuff. This is his great film. He did some stuff that was good, like King of New York, and he did a lot of stuff that wasn't very good. So less said about that, the better. He's a very uneven filmmaker. But now this film is being remade by Werner Herzog, starring Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
And Jim's going up to Toronto in a few weeks. We're going to get a report on this early, I suspect. I mean, I can't picture this film being made once, Jim, let alone being remade. I'm stunned.
But I think there's more going on in this film than just the salacious content. I mean, there's
way more.
A lot
way
more going on. Here's a great scene from Bad Lieutenant. This is Harvey Keitel talking to the nun who had a horrible crime made against her. This is from Bad Lieutenant.
Listen to me, sister. Listen to me good. The other cops will just put these guys through the system. The juveniles, they'll walk. Get it? But I'll beat the system and do justice. Real justice. For you.
I have already forgiven them.
Come on, lady. These guys put out cigarette butts on you. Get with the program. How could you forgive these these guys, excuse me. How could you? Deep down inside, don't you want them to pay for what they did to you? Don't you want this crime revenged?
I've forgiven them.
But do you have the right? You're not the only woman in the world. You're not even the only nun. Your forgiveness will leave blood in its wake. What if these guys do this to other nuns? Other virgins, or women who die from the shock. Do you have the right to let these boys go free?
That's a wrenching scene from the great film Bad Lieutenant, Harvey Keitel, almost really just trying to examine what justice is in this film. It's a remarkable film. Bob and I can't believe it got made, but we're very glad that it did. And our final film tonight, of all the things we've talked about, sex and religion and everything else, this film, in its simplicity, makes it one that we couldn't believe it got made. And now we join a dinner conversation in progress.
But those are typical evenings for us. I mean, we go to dinners and parties like that all the time. These evenings are really like sort of sickly dreams because people are talking in symbols. Everyone's sort of floating through this fog of symbols and unconscious feelings. No one says what they're really thinking about. Then people start making these jokes that are really some sort of secret code.
Right. Well, what often happens in some of these evenings is that these really crazy little fantasies will just start being played with, and everybody will be talking at once and sort of saying, hey, wouldn't it be great if Frank Sinatra and Mrs. Nixon and blah, blah, blah were in such and such a situation, always with famous people and always sort of grotesque? Or people will be talking about some horrible thing like the death of that girl in the car with Ted Kennedy, and they'll just be roaring with laughter. I mean, it's really amazing. It's just unbelievable. That's the only way anything is expressed, through these completely insane jokes. I mean, I think that's why I never understand what's going on at a party. I'm always completely confused. Debbie once said after one of these New York evenings, she thought she'd traveled a greater distance just by journeying from her origins in the suburbs of Chicago to that New York evening than her grandmother had traveled in making her way from the steppes of Russia to the suburbs of Chicago.
Oh, I think that's right. It may be, Wally, that one of the reasons that we don't know what's going on is that when we're there at a party, we're all too busy performing.
Uh-huh.
That was one of the reasons that Grotowski gave up the theater. He just felt that people in their lives now were performing so well that performance in the theater was sort of superfluous and in a way obscene.
Who would have thunk it? A dinner conversation with Wallace Shawn and Andre Gregory from 1983. Roger Ebert, who wrote Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, called My Dinner with Andre the best film of the year. Again, can't believe it got made, a dinner conversation. Bob, I actually think that this film is really enjoyable, but it's more about listening. To sit and listen to Andre Gregory. Of course, he's up in the metaphysical world, and Wallace Shawn sort of anchors him, but it is just an invigorating conversation. It may be completely boring to some viewers, but it is a wonderful film, and by golly, really glad this one got made.
And it amazes me, Jimmy, that that this film got made. The great Louis Malle, the late great French filmmaker, made this film, but that it also was a hit.
Yes, it was.
Wow. I mean, who'd have thunk? And boy, aren't we glad this film got made.
Yes.
A wonderful film.
We want to thank you for listening to Take Two tonight. I want to thank our projectionist, Hank, for all of his great projecting. And I hope you enjoyed the subject tonight. Hopefully you have a film favorite or something you don't like, and you can say to yourself, boy, I can't believe that film got made. We'll see you next week on Take Two.